Huh? Are we live?
It says we're live. 20 seconds.
Mom, is that you? Hello?
Am I a cartoon character?
I keep drinking this wine glass, but there's a controller in it. It tastes funny.
Am I the A?
All right. Welcome to Videogame Sommelier. Hey guys, cheers. Good to see you guys. We are starting November 2020 with a brand new game, as we do every month. So if you happen to be watching us on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube, whether it's live or later, feel free to leave a comment and we'll discuss it either live on the video or later on just in the chat. And if you would like to find us on Instagram, we're also there. So, hey guys, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, so good.
Good.
This game is so awesome.
Strong.
It is awesome.
And, I'm not having nearly the success as these two are, but I'm getting through it, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, it'll be good to go through this together. In addition to being just a discussion group, I think of us as like a support group for the trials and ups and downs of the various games we're playing.
Especially for this game.
Yes.
No, they're saying this because of the angry text I berate them with at 2 a.m. Why are you making us play this? I'm just kidding. This is a fantastic game, and I'm super pumped to talk about it. Despite my struggles, this has been really fun. So this will be a really, really good deep dive.
Yeah. And that game that we are talking about is none other than Hyper Light Drifter.
Oh, well, no wonder I'm having a hard time. I haven't been playing this one.
Oh, shoot.
And been playing Star Wars.
See, that's
Now-
what Star Wars should have been.
It's what Star Wars should have been.
Yeah.
That's a
see that?
super interesting claim. And as long as you're bringing up Star Wars, I got a Spirit jersey. Do you guys are Spirit jerseys a thing in Texas?
I don't know what that is.
It's a kind of shirt. It's a cut of shirt. It doesn't matter. It's a big thing at Disneyland. So this is my first Spirit jersey, and it's of The Mandalorian. So I'm wearing this for two reasons. The first is The Mandalorian is pretty great. But the second, I think Hyper Light Drifter has a lot in common with The Mandalorian. You've got like this solo warrior, right? Just going into the land, righting wrongs. And then with little baby Yoda floating behind the Mandalorian, there's still this like unexplained
The
thing
drone.
floating behind the Hyper Light
Yeah.
Drifter. And so, yeah, it just felt very fitting. So, but Rye, I want to hear why you said it was what Star Wars should have been.
Put the slide back on the Jumbotron.
Okay.
Look at that. So they said in the Kickstarter that is a blade made of hardened light.
Ooh.
What other than a lightsaber is that?
A fluorescent light bulb.
Look at that. He's chopping off an alien's hand just like Obi-Wan.
And the nice thing is, there's this doesn't cauterize, so it still teaches the lesson. It looks like there's blood. So unlike a lightsaber, which makes much more of a clean cut. So this is like
Except in A New Hope.
oh.
If you recall, our first lightsaber violence, it has a trail of blood.
Oh, you're right. In the bar in Mos Eisley.
Mhm.
You are exactly right. My mind is blown.
Thought about that, and wow, that's totally spot on.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I think they kind of like anesthetized it for future, movies so that it would be more friendly with kids.
Okay. That's fair because that moment horrified me as a kid.
Yes, it did me
Man.
too.
George Lucas was like, what better than to send Anakin after children, right? It's perfect for kids. Just to put the nightmare in there. Sorry, we don't need to go this far down the rabbit hole.
I was gonna start talking about a robot chicken episode. Yeah, we were going a little too far off the beaten path.
So Hyper Light Drifter.
Hyper Light Drifter.
The name, my gosh, the name.
Yeah,
Hyper Light Drifter.
It is about everything you think it's going to be based on that title post. It really is, because I mean, half the time you see a cool cover and maybe the game looks or feels like it. No, it literally just feels like it's as awesome as the poster is. It's a pixel art kind of game. If you like that kind of, which I do, I think it's awesome. The colors are like a neon, poppy, bright, fun color, sort of futuristic feel to it. And for me, more than anything, the music. That's what gets me. It's all the music that gets the ambiance for you right there.
Look at this.
Yeah. So, Jimmy, when you're talking about the colors, there were such striking colors in this. And then you also mentioned the soundtrack. And, Rai, you had pointed that out in our kind of preview last week. The soundtrack by Disasterpeace.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the visuals are so striking when the style of play for me from my gaming experience is closest to Zelda. I did play Zelda when it looked like this was on my Game Boy, right? And so it did not have these colors. It had the Obra Dinn colors. So the richness of this world is really, really interesting.
It's funny you say that, because if you really think about it, if I could rewind all the way back to the Game Boy days, this right here is like what you as a kid wished it was looking like when you're playing your Game Boy. You know what I mean? And flash forward to now, and yes, of course, we have games that look completely realistic on next-gen consoles and whatever, but when you play this, there's a nostalgia factor, but it's sort of like, yeah, we're going to make it awesome, though. It's not going to feel so retro. It's what I wish I could take this back and put it on my Game Boy, and little me would have gone nuts.
Justin, back when we talked about Journey, we talked about this idea the developer had of flow. And it's this concept, this like game mechanical concept that a good game achieves a sense of momentum for its players, such that they lose their sense that they're holding a controller and manipulating, the person, but rather they're totally immersed in the game, the world, the questions, the movement. And a lot of what a great game designer does is like perfect that flow and make sure there's nothing kind of standing in the way of it. And one of the big ways they do that in Journey is by removing all dialogue. So this is really curious that now we look at Hyper Light Drifter, a game that has no dialogue, no words, only visuals. Yeah. And yeah, exactly right. And the peanuts. But the whole experience of the game is its movement and the fact that you're dashing everywhere and that your character is, slicing, beasts and robots and stuff apart. It's a game that I don't know how you would title it any other way than by trying to come up with some kind of word salad that captures that flow, and thus Hyper Light Drifter grabs it. It's a genius title.
Yeah, you guys have already mentioned that it totally fits. And it, at least so far, I've played 3 of the regions. There's not an explanation for, here's what drifters are, or here's what hyperlight is, or anything like that. Because, right, like you were saying, there's no words. So I hadn't thought that the justification of the name isn't in the content and the exposition, but it's just in the way that title makes you feel is the way the game makes you feel. Hyper Light Drifter, absolutely. That fits for my experience of this game.
As the color scheme reminds me of like an 80s retro but futuristic sort of thing. So, you go back to like, Blade Runner or something. It pops out. And what's really fun about this is it is very much a, like a futuristic world, but yet also kind of not. Like there's a lot of ruins. You're in places that are like forests or old dilapidated buildings and dungeons, but yet it all still feels very much of that it's got, I don't know how to describe it other than just the nostalgic like retro future feel, and I love that. And so in all fairness, I'm very partial to stuff like that. I loved Blade Runner when I was younger, and all of that kind of thematic sort of context that those worlds build just always appeal to me. So even jumping into this, there's just a natural grab for me to jump into this world.
Yeah. Did you guys see Aronofsky's Noah a few years ago?
Mm-hmm.
As you were describing this game, Jimmy, it was reminding me of some of the visuals of that, where it's like Noah that we think of as happening in the distant past happened after the fall of some civilization that's more advanced than we are today. So it kind of blurs that line of like, how many cycles of humanity have been on the earth, and was this in the past or in the future? But it's and this is where I come to this episode with just so many questions, and I don't know exactly what the game will focus on and what the game will see fit to answer for me, and what is just the experience. Because going back to these images, we see these guys a number of times, but they are not strong and powerful and lit up. We see them presumably dead and in varying states of decay. And I just don't know what happened, and this other image looks like it would be one of their weapons, but we don't have a sense of, we don't get to see them wielding it, and we don't get, and obviously with all this moss and growth, this has been decades at least.
You know what it's very reminiscent for me of, which was the early shots in The Force Awakens when you see the Imperial ships just like crashed into the desert, with rays like exploding them. And we have the context for what the war looked like.
Right.
But if that was your first Star Wars film, or if you were a character in that world and you're a young kid just born and you missed all that, you see these massive things and think, dude, what the heck happened? Like that had to have been big. And you kind of get the same feel here with this. You see these giant robot looking kind of creatures, and they are massive. And you see the remnants of whatever it is that they did or experienced just laying around. And so it does beg questions, absolutely, as you're walking around them.
Yeah. The promise of Star Wars is that these, beautiful, mysterious ruins have some kind of cosmic or ancient significance that has yet to be discovered by, the viewer. And Hyperlight Drifter is absolutely tapping into that. But what I think is really important to like realize is that oftentimes this like very stylized, like, wow, it's very evocative. I feel like there's some deeper significance here and I don't know what it is. And I'm so excited for the journey. Often that doesn't have a satisfying resolution to it. Like the mysteries don't ever get, shown or when they're discovered, they're kind of smaller than they had seemed in your emotions. And what I think is really important about Hyperlight Drifter as a game is that it does that very evocative opening, which is wordless and it's weird. It feels like a trip, and
massive.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you're like frightened even as you're watching it. And the revelations that are under the surface there are as important as they feel.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
And I think what substantiates that is not so much this like, deep story that or intricate plot, but rather the developer's own history, which, you know, is kind of that that untold story that backs this game, which is that the developer is dealing with, or currently in the past and probably since, some kind of congenital heart defect or just chronic heart problem that has landed him in surgeries in the hospital, against which his entire life and experience has been a struggle to survive.
Right.
And so as you struggle with this game and you're sitting in the midst of these mysteries, you can't help but like feel the artistic struggle that he goes through, even just making the game itself.
Yeah. And with each of I feel like in each area, you kind of get one little story from someone.
Yeah.
You get the story of, hey, some people came and invaded and burned down our city, but we got away with some of the eggs. You know, they were bird people, and so we got some of the offspring out. And there were like rats that were chained to the wall, and they're like, hey, we were raided and we were enslaved, but we're trying to escape. And there's this underlying spirit of perseverance and fighting that is really pretty remarkable. And it gave me this sense of hope even in these horrible situations, because the people that these things happen to continue to soldier on, continue to kind of see the value of the basic fundamental value of life and surviving to fight another day. And you get these in little 3-picture comics, right? But it's some of the only stories you're presented with. And so I've spent some time thinking about, okay, what do these have in common? And it just kind of boils down to life is important and worth fighting for, and we're fighting that fight. And knowing just the little bit about the developer's story and history, I think, you know, galvanized that for me and was just like, wow, you know, in the midst of potentially hopelessness, finding the hope that it's like, hey, at least we made it. You know, hey, at least we're here now. Yeah, so I'm just excited to see what else the game throws at me as we go into the 4th region and whatever's after that.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny you say all that. I didn't know that until you brought that up, Ryan, right before I think it was our last time together. At the very end, you shared that bit, and that I think changes. I feel like those should be necessary lenses that players ought to have on when playing this game. Not to take away from the experience. If you don't know that, you'd probably still absolutely love this game. But having those lenses on, knowing what he's gone through, I feel like you can totally see his experience like bleeding out into this game. And one of the little things that happens to the main character that I picked up on really resonates with what you just said, Justin, is there's a message of perseverance and strength. And for the main character you're playing, whenever he is weakened or even just randomly, he will see him stop and like coughing up blood. And that communicates to me, this guy's not invincible and he is weak. And knowing that the guy, the developer who made this probably had very similar, like quite probably literal experiences like that. And yet he's persevering onward. Like, so we're playing this game despite having these weaknesses and pressing onward and fighting and solving and learning. And there is a sense of, it doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm a superhero or I'm, RoboCop going in and, just blasting through. You feel for the main character a little bit, knowing like, oh shoot, man, he's coughing up blood. Are you okay? Kind of a thing,
Yeah.
So in like a really odd way, you start to really care about this guy that you're playing. And it's amazing. You're doing all this with literally no text. Like it's incredible to hear how we're piecing all these things together with no words, no dialogue, a couple images, and the power of images are just it's incredible.
Yeah, and the game has some typical hero elements where you can kind of level up, right? You know, learn a new attack, learn to dash further. So there's some somewhat predictable things, but then I feel like the character himself feels more like Frodo from Lord of the Rings, where it almost feels like he's getting weaker. Like he is learning and he's gaining skill, but it feels like we're on a downward arc with his health.
Yeah.
And so just going back to what you were saying, Jimmy, like, yeah, it's not RoboCop. It's not some unbeatable superhero.
I'm not
It's just
Iron
some
Man
guy.
flying in and blasting away at somebody. Like
Right. We don't have tank missiles here.
The dude is the dude's struggling as he's going through this.
I really need to brag on this game because, you know, we've played a few games here and they've been some of the best. We haven't played a lot of games like this, this is in the style of a hack and slash action, very, very light RPG, you know, elements. This game is so unlike many, many games of its kind. And I'll point out a couple things. One, the lack of dialogue is insanely ambitious.
That's awesome.
It is so difficult to pull off a game like this. And while we talked at the beginning about the kind of retro style graphics as being kind of, you know, old school, you know, reminiscent of the Game Boy, this is by no means a simply like a game where they didn't spend a lot of time with the graphics.
Right.
The animations and the level of detail packed into each scene, and the very fact that we can coherently talk about every moment that we experienced in this is a sign of just the artistry that went into the environmental storytelling of this game. And in some ways, this game was an entrepreneur in that regard. Lots of games since have done more with environmental storytelling because Hyper Light Drifter existed and did so much with it. So that's one thing. Another thing, as we pointed out a moment ago, is that you feel like you're getting weaker in the game. That is just not what happens in video games.
Yeah.
Right.
If you scoured the shops looking for a health upgrade, you were disappointed, right? It's like, when do I get to get more health? I'm like, these 5 bars don't give me a whole lot to work with. And that's the point, right? You can get more health recharges, only 2 more.
But even those are hard to come by. It's not like you just can warp to a place and, I'll heal up real quick and do this. Like, you have to go hunt down places to get healthy.
And health recharges are a double-edged sword. Like, using them takes about 1 second of time. Mm-hmm. And I've died so many times just trying to use the health recharge.
Yeah.
That was exactly the opposite of what I tried to do there.
Yeah. This is where I'm getting crushed is.
Yeah.
But so there is there's like a dance that I feel like they did in making this. It's a balance of you do get these upgrades and abilities you learn, and that's helpful. But like you said, you don't have a whole lot of health. I mean, in real life, if we get beat up, like, we're not invincible. I don't know. I'm not Mike Tyson. I can't take a punch or two. And so it's one of those things, like, your character takes a punch or two and you're like, I'm almost dead. So I have to recharge my health. And you're right? It takes time, precious time. And so the time you're regenerating your health, 1 second, like, okay, everybody says 1 second. That's nothing. No, 1 second in this is like, I'm just going to kick back for a minute, pop open a drink while all these, like, it feels like a minute. And by the time you've done it, the odds are you've probably been hit again and your health is already slightly depleted even more. And so I feel like there is a really cool and purposeful balance to that. So we'll give you the ability to do strong things at the expense of it takes time to keep your health. There is a dance you have to play in order to do this. It's not easy at all.
No. And since there's so few health bars, right, in any given like health cycle, you're constantly bargaining like, should I wait until I get all the way down to the last bar?
Right.
Or should
When do I do
play
it?
safe and do it now? Because I'll benefit more if I get hit again. But then you are running the risk of, dying
There's
when you're
this
trying
strategy you're playing the whole time. And while you're doing it, you're like, crap, trying to run around and hide. Like you're doing so many things at once while you're doing the math in your head. Is this worth making this move right now?
And then there's something about using the health benefit that feels medical. Like I keep imagining an EpiPen.
It's like a syringe that plunges into his heart.
Yes. And so it feels so abrupt and like obviously it's good, but it underlines
it's not relaxing looking
you
at all.
Needed this. It underlines like the severity of what's going on. Just even in the way they and instead of upbeat music or something, it's a weird sound. Yeah,
it makes that thunk kind of sound, that thud. Yeah. So this game is visceral. It is the words are in the sounds that are made and in the pink spots of blood that are spurted and in that dash away from the slice that would have killed you. And it's in that opening when, as we saw, that guy's standing there with his sword facing against titans that easily are 20 times his size, that are clearly destroying the world, and he's standing because the world has to be defended. And it's incredible, right?
It's an Avengers Endgame moment. It's the Captain America facing the whole thing, and he's beaten down in that scene too.
This game takes its visual cues from a Japanese director called Hayao Miyazaki. And Miyazaki's work was a part of of some of our childhoods because he was releasing Pixar level animations at the time that we were children, and only some of them managed to make it over to the States through Disney. Actually, Disney picked up their North American releases. One of them is a film called Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, and Nausicaa features what they call the giant warrior, which if you were to Google that, you'd be like, wait a minute, that's just the giant titans in Hyperlight Drifter. Did they literally just rotoscope that thing, right? And in some ways they totally did. Like the image itself is so evocative, seeing those giant titans and their gross looking faces, right? There's even a centipedal tapeworm type flying creature that literally is in one of the like the pink Hyperlight Drifter that saves you. It's in some of his bad dreams, or it's his haunted thing, right? Oh, it's totally gross.
Don't need that.
Yeah, but it's these visual images are very blatantly lifted from Miyazaki's work, but they communicate a kind of environmental storytelling that spans, language, right? You see these titans, you're like, yeah, these are images of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, this is it.
Mom,
what are you showing me again, Mom? And I mean, like those films, it's about, protagonists having to find a way to beat them through more than just brute force.
Oh, yeah. You can't beat them by force.
Yeah. And you get the stories of their fall in part through the characters that have survived. Some of them, especially in the West area, they describe how they take down a Titan using like a crystal railgun or something, and they shoot it through the Titan's forehead. And you can find the body of the Titan lying in the midst of the forest, But of course, by using that crystal railgun, it like backfires and spawns the crystals all over the forest, which imprison most of the good people in the crystal, killing them. And
got it.
there's this haunted moment when you can find your way to a secret tree house, and when you get inside, all that's really there are just the forms of people encased in crystal, and you're like, this is a dead end. They're all dead.
Yeah, there have been moments where I'm wandering through that area and I'm like, oh, there's a guy trapped in there. I'll let him out. And then you smash it and there's nothing there. And you're like,
it just shatters.
Yeah.
I just broke his dead body.
Yeah. It's a game that's so haunted. Obviously, the main character is very haunted by two forces, right? By the jackal, which is a lift out of Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? What is it? Anubis, the jackal.
That sounds right. I don't.
You should
have all
look
of those
that up
right
too
I've
after we're
forgotten
done with
hieroglyphics.
this. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Anubis's story includes a detail that I haven't seen picked up in any commentary. So I'm bringing that up next time we talk about this.
Boom. Got it.
But this character, even that screenshot you showed, Justin, of him by the fire, Anubis is watching, and the drifter's shadow is casting a shadow like the jackal head behind him. So there's a sense in which Anubis is a projection of the drifter. And it's very subtle, but you see it there.
Yeah.
You know, that's intentional. And you see all those, you know,
The eyes
creatures,
around.
staring. It's an incredible game that I think asks a lot of the viewer, not just to feel along with the story, but to really wrestle with its images and to take those images seriously, not just as a fun popcorn, you know, thriller. These images are the images that haunt the developer. And we are living his haunting.
Yeah.
So when you get beat down, Jimmy, by that West boss for 30 minutes, I mean, how long did that guy have to wrestle in a hospital bed, right?
Well, that's just it. That's what I'm saying is, without that nugget of knowledge, I would have enjoyed this game, but I don't think it would have had the impact that it's having now. If you don't know what that guy's going through, you can obviously tell. Yeah, when a person makes a work of art, a game, a piece of music, a drawing, a video, you see them in their work, right? You can oftentimes tell the story that they're telling through that piece, and this is no different. So I have thought long and hard about that. And the thing that jumped out to me the most was what I mentioned earlier. I'll be weak and coughing up blood, and I'm thinking to myself, how many times did that guy deal with something like that similarly, just like walking around? You know what I mean? Not even in the midst of like a battle or a challenge in his life, just every day was a challenge, or maybe still is a challenge. I don't know much about him now. But all that being said, yeah, it's one of those things where you can get real frustrated. And I did, because it's not just like one 30-minute session I've gotten my butt kicked. It's been like multiple 30-minute sessions where I keep getting my butt kicked.
Yeah.
But you're right. How many times did he have an experience like that? And when you think about that, like, you're frustrated at the game, and then you kind of stop and think like, oh man, that's what this dude goes through, you know, regularly. So I'm mad that I can't beat this boss, but what I'm really living is kind of this guy's just life experience. And it really makes you kind of stop and humble yourself a bit.
Yeah, these struggles feel so trivial in light of that. Because I've been reflecting on, you know, we need to play this game. We need to beat different elements so that we can have things to say for our conversation and all of that. And so I can feel like up against the clock or something, but when you put it in light of where this comes from, and then just even what I was saying about having the different characters that all seem to persevere through incredible odds, it kind of, takes me down a notch. And then, also makes me ask questions about my own life. Like, what am I stressed out about right now that I don't need to worry about in light of what I'm interacting with,
Yeah, it's kind of a mindset of, crap happens, but it can always be worse too, right?
Yeah.
Like I could be having a bad day, but I'm not struggling with congenital heart failure,
Yeah.
And so that's a it's so funny to have this conversation because I don't ever think about video games in that light. Get my butt kicked by a boss, I get mad. Like I've done this how many times? How many times with the chain dash? And you can come up with all these different things and you can get upset about it and laugh about it and everything, but it's rare that I'll actually stop and think, oh, this experience is tied to something very real. It's not often you play a game that pulls a person's real life struggle and throws it right at you, and you're playing it out in a video game form, of course, but you're in a way living, like you said, Ryan, the haunting. You're living the pain, the fear, the anxiety, the adrenaline that you go through in all this.
Yep.
It's not all happy and flowers and rainbow sunshine stuff.
So I'm pulling a little bit from the promotional copy for this game, but the Drifter's purpose is to he's a seeker of the lost lore. You get some of this through the cutscenes, right? Like he can see visions of the apocalypse, of the way the world was. He can see how bad it is, and certainly his haunting by that black corruption is in some ways tied to this gift. He's the one being haunted by it, and his desire to stop it, to fight it, to flee it, to become powerful enough to defeat it. And the journey he shares with that mentor figure who saves him after he almost dies after the campfire scene at the beginning of the game is kind of a struggle shared by these drifters. What I find really fascinating about this is that this is a game that has no verbal communication. And so there's really like no lore or verbal puzzles to think about. All there really is symbols and the idea that I have found something behind a hidden nook that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to find, but that I looked, or I saw a secret symbol and I followed. And that kind of experience of exploration, of discovery, of unearthing something that has been lost pervades this game and is part of, in some ways, the experience of the triumph of it. It's not simply that we're defeating the big bosses, but that we're also like linking and cataloging and like saving the information. And that includes the stories of the people you meet. You are hearing their stories, and thus their stories are not wiped out by the creatures that have defeated them. And the Drifter is like that repository of knowledge, and that knowledge in some ways is how he is defeating, the evil.
Yeah, you're not letting things just be lost and forgotten. You're collecting that, discovering it, and then preserving it in many ways. And and oftentimes that helps add meaning and value to even the people's deaths in there. Like you discover like you said, a treehouse filled with people stuck in crystals that all died. If you hadn't discovered that, would anyone else have? Would that ever be known? Would that experience ever be out there? And so there's a lot of value in discovery, in learning, in finding these things and then cataloging them and documenting them and, experiencing and sharing them.
That's right. It's an awful lot like Obra Dinn in that way, right?
Yeah.
Where the fates of people are important in the end, and their deaths are not in vain because their stories are being known and told, and we are reconciling the justice of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. the Drifter is that executor of justice in that sense. You know, he's righting the wrongs, as was said earlier, and telling the story.
Cool. I since I didn't know where the story was going, I was having part of me being like, okay, so you know, there's a heart defect, you know, that the producer has been dealing with his entire life. Um, is the Drifter representing an antibody or something like that? You know, going through and killing the bad things, or am I somehow like the cancer? You know, and I'm like killing the fauna and flora of everything. Like just even little things in the game, like when I have sliced flowers down or something like that. I'm like, oh, should I have done that? So I'm happy to hear just from what you're sharing, Rye, that I can like settle into who the Drifter is and like I'm doing a good thing. Like there's just been an wondering in the back of my mind, like, am I gonna find out that I'm the bad guy this whole time? So that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Since I've been avoiding, spoilers for this game, you used before we went on live, Rye, you used the term monolith. And that's the first time I've heard that related to this game. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to discover when you find hidden nooks and crannies. And I'm curious also to ask, like, what was the first secret you found and what that was like? Because I played this game probably 4 years ago, and I vividly remember the first secret I found. It was like that eye-opening. Zelda, which is like a template for this game in some ways, has these secrets, and they play a little sound effect when you find it. Yeah, exactly.
I love Zelda.
The idea of finding a secret is so alluring and fun as a player.
Yeah.
What do you get when you do that? So in this game, you get gear bits, which I guess is like the technical name for it. I don't know if that's based on marketing copy or game files, but otherwise they're just little golden, symbol things that then once you collect 4 of them turn into a piece of currency you can use to buy upgrades. So gear bits or whatever, right? That's you find those, you find health packs, you find in some cases different costumes, different colored cloaks and swords. And presumably those different cloaks and swords have very subtle effects on the way the character plays.
Oh.
Just FYI. I mean, there's only 1 or 2 that are very overt.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's simply just small little aids, this kind of thing.
Okay. Does it actually aid you, or is it just?
Yeah, no, it does change. It does change the ratios of the game. The character's movement speed or recovery rates or stuff like that.
So then,
I've
Jimmy,
literally not found those.
Oh,
so
yeah. I was going to say, use the orange sword then. Maybe that's some of my advice too. The orange sword has been serving me, but I just thought it was aesthetic. I didn't know that there was any ability upgrade or anything like that.
Yeah. Some of them, there's a clue as to their purpose in the way you discover them. So if you have to chain dash to get one of them, maybe it helps you with your chain dash. That's
sure, right. There's a tie-in connection
Yeah.
to it. Oh, that's cool.
You can also find keys which unlock doors and unlock further secrets. You can also find what was the other thing that came to mind? Well, the monoliths are the last one on the list, right? But the monoliths are these giant, you might think of them as just stone tablets that then have these some kind of hieroglyphs that are translated and appear by some kind of ghostly apparition that shows up when you arrive and somehow maybe translates it or reveals what's on those stone tablets. And as it turns out in games like this, there is a cryptology to it. So you can take the symbols on the stone tablets and translate them into English letters.
Whoa.
So that is perhaps the only time in which the game is speaking to you, but it's doing so in a very opaque way.
God,
Right.
this is another, not to revert too much, but as we talk about this, the level of detail that is in this game is astounding.
Yep.
When you play Zelda games, and I might have played all the Zelda games I think that I can play. That was my jam as a kid. I loved them. And when you find secrets, right, it's so satisfying and so exciting, and you get really into it. But what's impressive with this game is like not only are the dungeons big, but they're challenging. And I didn't know that. I didn't even know how many other like outfits you can get, or different color sword. Like I thought I did a pretty good job exploring, and obviously I haven't. I'm usually the type of a player who will. I'm a slow gamer. I will explore for a long time because it's just fun to do that, and that's just not to beat my chest on it. It just goes to show to me the level of like detail and complexity that is put into this, and then to do that with the monoliths and the tablet stuff is like, man, like it's not just a small little world. It's not just a Game Boy game that looks pretty and colorful. Like
Right.
there is crazy purpose. There is an impressive amount of visuals and music and feeling that's invoked in with this. And then more than that, the level of detail and the layers are thick. Like you can spend a lot of time in this game. That's really cool for a game like this.
Yeah, and I was really proud of myself because I think this game started to make me react the way that I reacted when we played Outer Wilds for a different podcast. When I'm just like, I don't get it. I need someone else to tell me what's going on. I want someone to give me the rule book and explain everything. And this game throws a lot at you. When I was going through and collecting all those different things, like the keys, like I that's again a term that hadn't been used in this game yet, and so I think I have like 3 of them, and
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
know
have
how
a
to
ton.
use them yet. Because it always says like, yeah, you need 10 more.
Yeah, if you have 50, you can come here. I'm like, oh, well,
Yeah,
cool.
and so I was really proud that I was just kind of like, trust the process. Like I'm gonna understand this as time goes on. I'll figure this out. And yeah, I've really been enjoying this game and excited to finish
Those
it.
discoveries are always so fun to me, where you find a door that requires keys, and not just one, a number of them, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you could get keys. Like,
Yeah.
which tells me there's always different layers of discovery out there that I haven't yet found. And that's really exciting because you're like, oh shoot, okay, I can go find keys. Now I want to know what's behind that door. And so it just opens up all these doors and avenues for you to do more than just play the storyline. And I'm sure this all ties into the storyline, not that they're just, side missions for the sake of side missions, but it does feel fun to have a purpose to explore beyond just I'm just checking stuff out. There's actual meaning for it.
It's one of my big questions about the game, actually, like what the purpose of all the additional like objectives, collectibles, secret delving, what the purpose of all that means in relation to the main plot. It's not something we can talk about now because we haven't finished the main plot, but that is like an open question that I have. And I have an inkling of where that might go, but I'm eager to talk about that next time.
Great.
Yeah. There's a lot I have yet to do, and beating this boss is one of them. This Western boss, he is a doozy. My word. No, but it was one of the things I texted y'all about this a couple nights ago is, Ryan, you talk about games being fluid, and I feel like this is a game that feels more and more fluid the more you play it. At least it does for me. When you learn the controls of a game, you get more and more comfortable with it. And I do feel like there has been this steady progression, each time I play it, that I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel I can go in and whoop some butt now. whereas during some of these, you'll have guys come out, overwhelm you, and you'll die 5 times or 100 in my case. But no, but
whatever number it is.
Right.
We don't need to talk about this.
No, but like it's one of those things where you just start to become intimately comfortable with how to chain dash and where to hit and how people move, and you start to not think about it as much anymore. And the more fluid that experience becomes, the more you feel like you're kind of channeled in, and that's a really fun way to play a game when you feel that way.
Yep.
I feel like this does a good job of getting there. It takes time. You don't just start there, and so the effort almost feels like it has a payoff in that it feels more fluid. You start to feel more confident in your ability to play it. It's work almost, but it does feel like there is benefits for the work you're doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned chain dashing. That was one of the most frustrating mechanics to me for a long time.
Still is.
And I'm still inconsistent with it. But I was telling you guys, I was in the little roundabout room and I got a chain dash of 100 and I opened a secret door and I went in and you get a little gold gear bit. And I'm like, oh, that was not worth the amount of time I just put in. And then in the other door, because, once you go over the screen, you can see what's in, like, the other area. And it's, like, another outfit and sword. I'm like, I want that. I want that. And so I'll get that eventually, maybe. But the process of me getting to where I could chain dash 100 times in a row was like training. It was muscle memory, and it was really weird to kind of try to get in the zone to where you could do that consistently for a little while. So that was odd. So when we're talking about flow and stuff, that's the picture that's coming to my mind where I'm like, yeah, that was weird when I was able to do that. So yeah.
There are tutorials online about using a metronome.
Ooh.
Like you set up a metronome and you set your cursor to like exactly on the thing, and then you kind of go back and forth over the recharge pad. And if you hit the metronome consistently, you can go indefinitely.
Wow.
Oh, man.
Now I look at that and I go, wow, okay, so this game is really consistent.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a ton of trouble with the dashing too, and it's one of the biggest critiques of the game.
Sure.
I can't tell you the number of games that just cheat. The developers know you're never going to be consistent, and so they build in wiggle room. It's like they anticipate that, after 3 dashes, you're going to start hitting the button faster, so they like give you more allowance so that you always feel like you have control. And that's just the developer helping with the flow in one sense of the word, right? Like, so that you never feel frustrated that you can't execute the move you intended to do and you felt like you should have been able to, even though like you didn't really deserve it, right?
Right.
And I find that Hyperlight Drifter with the dash mechanic, like it's a little bit in your face about that.
Yeah.
And I remember there's a part where like I have to go across platforms that are falling and I have to use a chain dash to do it, right? And it's this horrible section that I probably spent 20 minutes on, and I went through all of my life, because you lose 1 bar of health whenever you fall. And you have 5 recharge packs, you have 5, so you have like 25 chances at this thing.
Oh.
And I lost all of my lives probably 7 times. So I would have actually like failed at the challenge like 150 times or something.
But see, that's another thing though. Like it kicks you in the butt, and then if you're successful finally, you're like, awesome, I got over it, and you have like 1 little thing of health. So in a way,
I know, right?
You like show up, you're like, yeah, I am screwed.
You've screwed your run. Yeah.
That happened to me, I think, in the north section, and I was like getting closer to the boss, and there was a section I was struggling with, and I finally got through, and I had like no health, and I kept dying because I had nothing to heal myself with, and I was getting bombarded with little bad guys. It's so again, it's one of those games where there is a lot of challenge to it, and it's not that it doesn't reward you because the game is rewarding, but it doesn't throw you a bone. It's not going to give you the easy way out. There's not a way to just magically have all your health. So you spend 150 times jumping across a bridge and get it, and there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
Now you have like no health to go forward.
And it kind of feels like this game doesn't give you participation trophies. Like you get through something and then it's like, yeah, and there's more to do. So get to it. Just about as rewarding as it gets is when there's like that random space in each of the areas where they just throw way more guys at you than you expect and you can't go anywhere. And then when you beat them, you do that cool little sword move, like, and you're like, yeah, I deserved that little,
yes.
But that's like just about as rewarding as the game gets.
I know it.
Because there's more to do. Keep going.
Yeah, like maybe they'll drop a little gear bit if you're lucky for defeating all of them like that. But oftentimes it's like, cool, yeah, you solved it. You're not done.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Yeah. It's a great example of a game where the challenge is its own reward.
Yeah, it really is.
Yep.
The number of games like that are few, and Outer Wilds is another example of this, where solving those puzzles is the satisfaction of the game. Hence, spoiling it for yourself just doesn't yield a whole lot else.
Yeah, you lose out. No, man, if I love doing Sudoku puzzles. It's kind of like that. It's the process that gets you. It's solving something that really finds its way to satisfy.
And
this is very
the fascinating, the great comparison, Jimmy, between Outer Wilds and Sudoku is all the information's there. Every single thing you need is there, and you just need to put it together and put it in the right order and organize it. But you have everything you need, and that was a great comparison. Yeah,
yes.
we'll talk about it on Videogame Sommelier at some point. It deserves a space in our cellar, right?
Yeah, I that had been. I know we're on a small tangent here, but listeners, go play Outer Wilds. Go do it. It is so
for
good.
The future when we play it together.
Oh, I just loved it. But no, Rye, the challenge is the reward, and there aren't a lot of games that will focus on that. I think is like a heavy theme.
Oh gosh,
it's so great. It really is.
Yeah, it's so important to just continue to mention this because games are usually about just making you feel good. They're a little bit like drugs.
There's a lot of escapism in games.
There is.
100%.
That's exactly right. And this game definitely scratches that I just want to go beat up monsters itch, right? And so you can kind of turn your brain off because you don't have to deal with any dialogue. You don't have to deal with any ideas except what your eyes are just kind of absorbing wordlessly. But what I find so genuine and in some ways wholesome about this game is that its violence and its tragedy is so birthed out of a real story. Like there is truth to it. It's not just spectacle meant to make you go, oh snap. There are like heart-wrenching stories and moments. Like when you get to the frog boss, it's so disgusting, right?
Oh, yeah, man.
It's so disgusting. He's got a guy in his hands, like one of the otter people, and he like throws him up to like catch him in his mouth, and he like partly misses and then like bites him in half.
And he's like burping out just like gunk. Yeah.
And like the whole path to this malevolent frog demon, right, has been littered with the bodies of slain otter people who lived in their nice, Eastern temples.
Yeah.
And then there's like guys that strung them up and like tortured them.
Oh, it's terrible. There's like their heads are on pikes, and the few survivors are like huddled in a church.
Yeah.
and they're
Yep.
like ailing to death.
Yes.
And then that's like opposite the gorgeous visuals of the area with the flowing
Yeah.
waters
Oh my
and kind of the Greco-Roman
It's a crazy
architecture.
juxtaposition.
So it's just we've already been talking about illness and cancer and stuff, but it feels like a cancer. Like this is that frog boss is not supposed to be there. That's
Yeah.
a desecration to what this
Yes.
place was and should be.
The North too, with their like cult birds, right? The like cult flock. They
Nice.
have bookcases, and instead of books on the bookcases, there are skulls.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I missed that.
I have to go
it's a
back
huge
and-
part of the visuals of the place. Now there are some books in some areas, but like other areas they've been taken over by like occultish skulls and like candles and little violent shrines for sacrifice, right? And you're like, oh my gosh. And you find the one survivor of the area, and he's like taking the eggs.
Yeah.
As you mentioned just in that story, he's preserved what he could of the young, right? And what's left is like these fanatics that are clearly horrible. And that boss is just a pain. Oh, such a pain to defeat with the magic that's like following you around and destroying the land. And I died so many times trying to defeat that guy.
Dude, that boss sucked.
He, for whatever reason, he was the one I beat the quickest. And I think I just completely ignored the magic floor. And I'm like, yep, I'm going to take a beating. But I just kept using that sword spin and then running away from him and shooting him. And it was just those two things. And then, regen my health. And I was able to kind of get through. But yeah, he was the fastest one for me, even though I'd say he was like the second most difficult of the three I've played so far.
Yeah.
The soundtracks for the bosses are unreal, and it's partly what makes it so good is that the lead up to these bosses are these weird haunting electronic soundscapes that then have these additional layers added in, and by the time you get to the boss becomes this pulse pounding horror symphony. And you are fighting the boss with that in the background, and you feel this sense of momentum, like I have to beat this boss because this piece has to end.
Yes, the power of music is incredible. It is amazing. You get enough of a beat or a tune, it can really invoke the like anxiety in you almost, and they use it very, very well, which is part of the reason I think I keep failing so bad fighting this West boss. Is the music starts and that boss like charges you, and you're just like ah, you just start like panic fighting almost. You know what I mean? It doesn't give you any sense of like you reach a calm. It's not like Kobe Bryant going into a game where he goes, like where they can go into the zone. The elements that are surrounding you like make you feel stressed out as you're fighting this. The music is definitely a huge part of that.
I do need to just say a couple things about the composer Disasterpeace and the other work this guy has done. He did the music for Fez, which was a kind of quirky indie puzzle game. I think it was released in 2012. And it's about this little two-dimensional character that finds himself with three-dimensional powers. And he's able to twist the world. And when that happens, he discovers things that are hidden in the dimension that most of his people can't see.
Wow.
And this gives him like teleportation powers because by moving along the third vector, he can find his way to places in the two-dimensional world he otherwise couldn't get to. But the kind of mystery of that game is that it's kind of a simulation-based game where this character is embedded in a world that's probably a computer program. And so it's very self-referential in that way. And the music underscores this, just like the the pixelated graphics. The music itself feels almost chiptune-esque. It's got these electronic sounds that feel like almost like a Game Boy that's been detuned.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So that's Fez's soundtrack, and it was phenomenally successful game, in part because the sound so fit the kind of theme of the game. And then this guy, Disasterpeace, did the music for the movie It Follows.
I was afraid you were going to bring this up because I feel like our conversation is going to go way too long now.
We don't have to talk about this movie, which is
I don't know.
one of my
I have
favorite
not seen
movies.
this. Oh, okay. Shoot. Then I need to add this to the list.
It is a solid horror film, so just get ready. But it's a film that so landed its ending. I realized what the film was about at the very last shot, and then just started sobbing as the credits rolled. And it was fantastic. But the composer and the music just really nails the abstracted nature of the theme of the film. And that's, again, because these electronic sounds kind of hearken unto elemental, abstracted, crude, big primal ideas in the music itself. And that is totally showcased in this game, Hyper Light Drifter. Like, he just goes to the wall with all these electronic sounds, and they're reminiscent of instruments, but they never quite feel like they belong in the real world. That's the disorienting nature of it, I think. The inventiveness of sound that is both melodic but also dissonant and grungy and doesn't feel like anything is right. So again, you're going to finish this game, and I'm so curious to get your impressions of the end, even in light of the way he uses the soundtrack at the end.
You are way too confident in my ability to finish this game. Way too confident.
Jimmy, I'll jump on Twitch and you can watch me finish the game. No. You'll get there. You'll get there.
This close.
So things we need to talk about next time. I want to learn, more about the world. We were talking about the Jackal and Anubis.
Yeah.
We were talking about what is the point of the extra layers and some of the secrets in light of what the main storyline is. Talk a little bit more about the music and how it kind of is the emotional pump and how it was used in that. What else? Anything else you guys are wondering about or needing to talk about? I'm excited to fight that thing in black that I keep seeing that, looks like a tentacly tar cancer thing. I'm excited to put it in its place.
This is about as generic and straightforward as it gets, but I'm just curious to see how the story goes at this point,
Yeah. I think we could easily fill an hour postulating about what the meaning is behind the game, right?
Yes.
If this game is one massive metaphor, some twisted, story of a deep human experience, what is that experience? And I think we're going to be able to pick apart the images and get at the core here. Wow, that almost sounded foreshadowing.
Ooh.
That shining white diamond, that he reaches for. What is that thing? Oh my gosh,
I'm excited.
Our discussion is going to be lit.
And guys, literally, who better to discuss this than the Videogame Sommelier group?
Videogame Sommelier.
I love talking with you guys. So we are typically first and third Wednesday of every month. This month's going to be a little different. We're not going to be on the third Wednesday, and we will communicate out soon when we will have our second wrap-up episode for this. But in the meantime, thanks for listening in. Thanks for playing these games with us. And until next time, cheers. And
Cheers.
Great to be with you two. And I look forward to continuing to talk about Hyperlight Drifter and Disasterpeace soon.
Yeah. And go play Outer Wilds. I'm going to say that every episode.
And then eventually we'll talk about it and it'll be great.
Yeah. Watch Face Off. That's your homework.
Watch Face Off.
All right. Cheers. Have a good night, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Great to see everyone. Take care.